The UN's nuclear watchdog, the International Atomic Energy Agency, says that Iran has stockpiled more enriched uranium than allowed in the 2015 nuclear deal. IAEA inspectors reported back from the Islamic Republic after the claims that Iran has accused European powers of not doing enough to help save the nuclear deal after the U.S. withdrawal and its actions since then over the last few weeks. Let's take a closer look at the dispute around the 2015 nuclear deal. U.S. President Donald Trump pulled out of the agreement last year and imposed tough new sanctions 3 months later. In May, Iran announced it would pull back on some of its commitments under the deal by increasing production of low-enriched uranium. And Iranian and European leaders met on Saturday in Vienna to try and save the agreement. But there was no breakthrough, and Iran has accused Europe of not doing enough to protect it from U.S. sanctions. We have 3 live reports for you in this news hour. Patty Culhane will join us from Washington, D.C., and Natacha Butler is in Paris. But let's begin first with Dorsa Jabbari in Tehran. So, Dorsa, how significant is this decision then by Iran?
Well, Hazem, this was a decision that was already made. This is just the fact that they've carried out on what they said they were going to do. On July 17th, the spokesperson for Iran's Atomic Energy Organization said that they were going to increase production and exceed this 300 kilogram of a stockpile of low-enriched uranium at a level of 3.67%. This is something we knew that was coming, and it is now here. Now, the important point is the foreign minister, Javad Zarif, has said that this is, in fact, what the European signatories of the nuclear agreement have forced Iran to do, to scale back their commitments. And it is within the agreement for the Iranians that they are allowed to do this under the nuclear deal to ensure that the other parties withhold their end of the deal. Now, the second phase of this scaling back their commitment will come on July 7th, when the 60-day period for the European deadline, for the European signatories to respond to the concerns that the Iranians have, is the deadline. And the Iranians have said that at that point, their second phase of scaling back from this agreement will be to increase the percentage of enriched uranium. They will go from 3.67% up to 20%. That is what we know they're capable of, but they haven't decided here what percentage they will go up to. This is really a test, I think, of what will come from the Europeans in the coming days. The Iranians are trying to say that they're not happy with how the Europeans are upholding their end of the deal. They haven't seen any of the benefits from this nuclear agreement, and there is no point for them to actually abide by it 100%. For now, they are scaling back their commitment step by step. It's not an all-out abandonment just yet. So we'll have to wait and see as to what the Europeans will do in the coming days to see what the Iranians will respond with.
Certainly is an opening question what they will do after this. Let's try to get a sense of that now from Paris. Natacha Butler is live for us from there. So, Natacha, what do the European powers do now? Because up to now, they have appeared sympathetic to Iran's situation, wanting to do what they can to salvage this deal. But with this action now by Iran, this puts them in something of a difficult position now, doesn't it?
Well, European powers are in a very difficult position. In fact, we've had some reaction to this decision by Iran to exceed its uranium limits from the British Foreign Minister, Jeremy Hunt, who's called this extremely worrying indeed. And I'm sure that reaction will be echoed by other European powers, including here in France, because what these European powers have been trying to do ever since Donald Trump pulled the US out of the 2015 Iran deal last year and reimposed US sanctions on Iran, European powers have been trying to battle and fight to save this deal. They say it's the best deal out there at the moment for peace and security in the region. And over the past few weeks, as those tensions have really been escalating between Washington and Tehran, European powers have consistently called for calm, and they've called on Iran to stay within the deal, not to break its commitments made under the JCPOA, because European powers do not want to be in a position in which they'll suddenly have to concede worried that perhaps Iran is breaking this deal, because that would be a huge blow to their diplomatic powers and credibility. And it's something they simply don't want to see happen, because they believe it would be very dangerous, that it could potentially lead to Iran having a nuclear weapon. It is why they've put in place a system that they hope will work in some way to enable some trade between Iran and Europe. It's called Instex. It's a special payment system which allows for trade outside of the dollar currency, but it's only going to be for small goods, some medical or humanitarian items. So it's never going to persuade the big multinationals like the French oil giant Total to do trade with Iran again. And really, this is the problem, because Iran is saying to Europe, you're not doing enough to shield our economy from these US sanctions. Instex, it seems at this stage at least, isn't enough. And Iran really seems to be turning up the pressure on these European powers, on Berlin, on Paris, on London, on the EU, to really do more.
All right, Natasha, thanks for that. Natacha Butler in Paris for us. Let's cross over now to Patty Culhane in Washington, D.C. for us. So over there in Washington, Patty, they're just waking up to this news. But should it be surprising to people there, given this ratcheting up of tensions that we've seen between the U.S. And Iran? This almost seemed inevitable.
I don't think it'll come as any surprise, because Iran did telegraph that this was going to happen. I want to point out we don't have any reaction yet from basically anyone in Washington, but it's the Independence Day holiday this week, so most of Washington basically just empties out. That said, we are told that the White House will issue some sort of statement in the coming hours. We'll, of course, bring that to you when we get it. But in the past, what we've seen is the National Security Advisor, John Bolton, he's come out and said, if they do this, then all options are on the table. I think the biggest question now, though, is how much status John Bolton has with the President of the United States. What we know is that when the President went to Korea, John Bolton wasn't there for that historic trip, but Tucker Carlson was. He's a Fox News talk show host who's very close to the President. He has been rallying against John Bolton and saying that basically he's too much of a hawk. He's trying to start a war with Iran, and he's told the President reportedly that if you go to war with Iran, you, excuse me, you will not be reelected. So right now it's clear that Tucker Carlson, who is much more of a dove when it comes to Iran, he has the ear of the president. Where that's going to leave where the White House stands on this, well, we'll have to wait and see in the coming hours and days.
All right, Patty, thanks for that. Patty Culhane in Washington.